Do you mind if I shoot like a portrait of you? I'm actually testing out the new Google Pixel device. They have like this new portrait mode that I wanted to test out. Today we're going on a photo walk to test out the cameras on the brand new Pixel 11 Pro XL. So we're gonna go over all the new features and show you guys how this phone performs in real life shooting conditions. Honestly, I think this is one of the best ways to show you guys what this phone is capable of. So first up is a video sample from the front selfie camera. The hardware is unchanged, but Google did say that they made processing refinements to video across the board. So let me know in the comments, how does it look? Also, I'm using the brand new teleprompter feature in the creator suite as I'm recording this. Honestly, it's such a great hack for people who want to create content, but maybe they freeze up in front of the camera or they forget what they want to say. With the teleprompter, you can just load up your script and it automatically scrolls as you are talking. The time is currently 1:45 and I'm at 96% battery. So I'll be checking in throughout the day and see how this battery life performs as well. I'm starting off this photo walk in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and I haven't really explored this area before, so I was pretty curious to see what I could find. Crossing the street, I saw this colorful ice cream shop on the corner and took a quick snap using the 1X camera. But I was a bit far, so I crossed the street to get a closer perspective. And I like this shot a lot more because you can actually see the details, as well as the colorful mural on the side of the building. Then on this street, I saw these trees growing towards the center, forming a canopy, which I thought was a really cool look. However, using the wide lens here didn't quite capture the effect I was thinking of. So instead, I backed up to the next street over and used the 5X telephoto instead. The compression effect of the tree branches overlapping is exactly what I was looking for. I hung out in this spot for a while, waiting for someone to cross the street. Finally, I saw someone about to cross, but at the same time, I noticed this silver Corvette driving up the street. So I decided to use Magic Capture, which is a new feature on the Pixel 11 series. Magic Capture allows you to record video, and Gemini will automatically extract the best frames and save them to your gallery as HDR photos. In my use case, Magic Capture was able to save this still of this person crossing the street, which was exactly what I wanted. It was also able to save this image of the car as it was pulling up to the stop sign, right before the black Toyota made the turn that would have blocked the view. So I'm pretty impressed with this. After walking around a bit more, I noticed this plant shop inside this garage, and I thought it was a pretty interesting environment. So I used the ultra-wide camera to snap a photo. There was also this weird cactus tree plant on the side, so I knelt down to get a more dramatic angle and also used the ultra-wide here. Okay, so after walking around and shooting with this phone for a while, I am really loving the camera experience. Pixels have always had really fast shutter speeds, but for some reason, this generation feels even more responsive than before. And it's especially noticeable when you're taking those 50 megapixel shots, because on my Pixel 10 Pro XL, I could only get maybe 6 or 7 shots off before it starts lagging, and the processing prevents me from taking more. But as you can see on the 11 Pro XL, it allows me to take way more photos before it starts lagging. So I'm not sure exactly how much of this is due to the new processor or if it's due to that new main sensor, but either way, this is a huge improvement from the previous generation. And speaking of that main sensor, I did notice color and post-processing improvements as well. I'll try to post some comparisons on screen. The ultra-wide is the same as the previous generation, but it was already pretty good, so no complaints there. However, I am noticing those same color and processing improvements. Looking at some of these photos, the colors definitely look much more natural, and the images overall look way less overprocessed. I'm just looking at these photos on the phone screen, so we're gonna have to pixel peep in Lightroom later on in this video to really take a look at some of these details. And the screen also gets insanely bright. At 3600 nits, I'm having no issues viewing this in direct sunlight. A couple of streets over, I saw this really cool motorcycle repair / workshop, so I asked the guy if I could take a couple of photos.
Can I take a few pictures?
Here's a quick comparison shot between the Pixel 10 Pro XL and 11 Pro XL. I do prefer the colors and the more natural look coming out of the 11 Pro XL.
Yeah. What's your name?
Matthias.
Matthias? I'm Alex. Likewise. Do you mind if I shoot like a portrait of you? I'm actually testing out the new Google Pixel device. They have like this new portrait mode that I wanted to test out.
So we chatted for a bit and he agreed to a few portrait shots. He was a super chill guy, so definitely go check out his Instagram and show some love. Anyway, I thought this was a perfect opportunity to also test out the new 5x portrait mode. Because it's such a long focal length, I had to step back out onto the sidewalk and the street to get some of these shots. The 5x telephoto provided really nice tight framing, and the cutouts of the person and the bikes look very natural against the bokeh in the background. I switched back and forth between the focal lengths as it was processing those portrait shots, and the pixel was able to keep up without issue. Then we did a couple of posed shots on the other side of the workshop. Again, these 5x telephoto portraits came out so good. The bokeh looks realistic and smooth, and the telephoto works really well for those tighter, chest-up headshots. Also, with the new hardware, the telephoto is able to zoom up to 120x now. But honestly, I'm not sure how much practical use there is in everyday shooting, but it's still impressive that they were able to push the zoom this far. And speaking of the zoom, I also noticed that the switching in between lenses is much smoother this year as well. A huge shout out to Mateus from Myth Motor for letting me hang around and shoot a couple of portraits of him. I really like the more natural out of focus rendering, and what's new this year is the 5x portrait mode. I know a lot of people have been asking for this feature, so I'm really glad they decided to finally add it. And this is made possible by the redesigned telephoto sensor and lens in this phone. The telephoto camera is one of my favorites to use on the previous Pixel. However, in low light, the quality dropped off pretty quickly. So I'm really happy that they decided to add a larger sensor this year for better low light performance. So I was pretty happy with the impromptu portrait session, but as I kept exploring the area, there also happened to be a car meet happening at the same time. There were a bunch of different cars, but this one caught my eye with the front lifted up. So I got down close to it and used the ultra wide to capture this dramatic perspective. Then I tried using the 5x telephoto to get a tight detail shot of the front of this orange car. And I'm really liking the colors and the level of detail. Plus, the upgraded telephoto lens enables a closer minimum autofocus distance at only 40 centimeters, which is roughly 15 inches, which is really useful for those close-up detail shots. So I kept walking around and a few other cars caught my eye. These were all taken with the 50 megapixel mode on the main lens. And honestly, I'm just so impressed with this camera. The colors really pop, but without looking oversaturated at the same time. And contrast actually looks pretty decent as well. In the past, I've noticed pixels tend to have really lifted shadows, which results in lower contrast and flatter images. But this new processing seems to be an improvement. I saw this car sitting on 3 wheels, and it was so cool, so I got a couple of dramatic shots with those low angles. And lastly, here are some lightly edited photos that I really liked. And before we continue with the photo walk and test out some of these camera looks, I just want to do a quick time and battery check. So it's currently 3:11 p.m. and my battery is at 76%. And I've been shooting a ton of photos and videos. So let me know in the comments below, what time today do you think I'm gonna have to plug in my phone? The wind is picking up and it's actually starting to rain. So I'm gonna keep going and hopefully wrap up this review soon. Camera looks is another new feature that was introduced this year where you can apply a stylized look to your photos. But Google says it's much more than just a basic preset because there's a ton of background processing happening in real time to create those dynamic images. So now I'm in a more commercial area and I noticed this retro looking deli across the street. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to test out some of those camera looks to better fit the vibe of the scene. A few blocks down, I saw another retro looking shop. So I used the velvet look and captured this photo of this person in front of me crossing the street. I think the velvet look might be pushing the white a little too far to the point where it looks almost overexposed. But I do like the shooting experience and how you're able to just swipe through the viewfinder and see how the different looks are being applied to your photo in real time. Oh, and pro tip, before you use any of these looks, definitely enable the RAW mode so you can keep the RAW files as backup, just in case you don't like the way the looks come out. I hope Google will give us a setting that allows us to save original JPEG files as well. On this next corner, I noticed this car on the roof of this building, and I really like the overall look of this image with the editorial look applied. You could even add the basic looks as a quick access control when you tap on the screen. This entire interface has been redesigned and is a huge improvement for people who want more control over their photos. For example, in this shot, I was able to adjust the white balance and exposure to customize the final image. However, there does seem to be a couple of bugs with this that I'll show you later when we get into the night shots. After experimenting with these looks, I have to say they're really fun to use, especially for street photography. It's really cool to see how these different looks can affect the final photo. Plus, I love the level of customization you can achieve to get that perfect stylized shots. However, as cool as this is, I'm not sure I would personally use them in my day-to-day shooting, because half the fun of photography is being able to edit and post-process the images. I love diving into Lightroom, applying my own presets, and being able to adjust those colors. But for the majority of people who want a stylized look without the hassle or time of editing, then I think these camera looks are a really good option. Now let's check out some low light and night shots. I was really impressed with this first image because I took it while I was walking and the pixel was able to freeze both my camera shake as well as the motion of the people walking towards me. Then I got down low to capture a slightly different perspective, and I really liked how balanced this photo came out. It's dark enough where you get the sense that nightfall is coming, but it's still able to retain a lot of detail in the shadows. I also found the dynamic range quite impressive. For example, you can see how the pixel is able to retain all of the details in the highlights right under those LEDs without it being blown out. So I saw this scene with everyone dining outside the restaurant, and it just felt nostalgic, so I used the Digi look with the medium grain setting to capture that vibe. I was also able to test out the telephoto in low light, and I'm happy to say the performance is great. However, this is where I started running into some of those issues with those revamped quick controls. As you can see, I was trying to manually adjust the exposure and shadows. However, the settings seem to reset when the scene changes. This is a bit frustrating as I assumed adjusting the manual controls would be able to override those auto settings. But in positive news, the instant night sight is incredibly fast and a huge improvement over the previous generation. Oftentimes, I notice the phone doesn't really even go into the auto night mode unless it gets really dark. Google says this is due to the upgraded Tensor G6, and it's a welcome improvement. Also, the video quality seems to be improved this year, especially in low light, because previously pixel videos were kind of grainy, so I'm glad to see the processing is much better. However, you still don't get any flat or log recording. Lastly, here are a few other low light shots that I took, and you can see just how clean and detailed these images are. Before we dive into Lightroom to pixel peep at some of these photos, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the photo walk. Did you find it helpful, or what else can I do to improve on my video next time? I wanted to fully disclose that Google did send me this unit to review. However, they have no say in this video whatsoever, and I'm currently testing a bunch of different devices, so I'm trying to stay as unbiased as possible. Alright, so now we're in Lightroom, and this first photo was taken with the main camera. Zooming into the middle, you can see that there are a ton of details that this lens is able to resolve. Even when moving into the extreme corners, there's still pretty much no smearing or distortion visible. Here's another example, and again, zooming into the center shows really good natural sharpness. You don't get that over-sharpened or over-processed look at all. Plus, I just love the way it rendered this scene with the light and the shadows. Moving on to the ultra-wide, it also looks really impressive when you zoom into the center of the frame. However, compared to the main camera, you can tell there's slightly more processing going on. And as you look into the corners, the details are starting to smear, but honestly, for an ultra-wide, this is not bad at all. Here's another example of the ultra-wide, and again, I really like the way the pixel is rendering and processing the colors. It's fairly consistent between all of the lenses. You also get a good amount of sharpness throughout the frame with that slight fall off in the extreme corners. Now for the telephoto, this is where sharpness starts to take a hit. Even zooming into the center of the frame, you can see there's just this overall softness across the image. It's almost like the lens is decentered or just slightly off focus by the tiniest amount. But honestly, it's not that noticeable unless you are pixel peeping in Lightroom. Here's another example with the telephoto, and this one looks a little bit better. You can still make out all of the lines in the brick and the details on the side of that building. Again, I just love the coloring here and the way it's able to capture the sunset glow bouncing off those clouds. Lastly, here's an example shot in low light with the ultra wide. With the processing and noise reduction, you can tell there is a softness throughout the image, but it is fairly clean and there is very little noise even in the darker corners. Here's another example taken indoors in low light, and looking across the frame, I really can't see that much noise at all. and it was still able to retain the color and the vibrance, which was really impressive. Alright, so that wraps up the photography part of the review, but I did want to touch on a couple of other thoughts because I have been using this phone as my daily driver. But first, if you are still watching at this point, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to support my channel. These videos take a ton of time to make, and a little bit of support goes a long way so I can keep creating these videos. Also, check out my Instagram and TikTok for more photo examples, daily updates, and shorts. Okay, so as I've been using the Pixel 11 Pro XL, one of the first things I noticed was just how much better this modem is. For example, on the subway with my old Pixel, the signal would cut out and it would take a while before I was able to reconnect. However, with this phone, it's pretty consistent in being able to reconnect right when the train pulls into the station. Another noticeable improvement is the overall smoothness and fluidity of the device due to the new Tensor G6. I know it's not the fastest and I don't have specific benchmark numbers available, but it definitely feels faster compared to last year, especially when you're multitasking or doing more intensive tasks like editing in Lightroom and exporting photos. Plus, this phone rarely gets hot and the battery life seems to be improved as well. Sometimes I can go nearly 2 days without needing to plug in the device. And after that photo walk, I still had about 30% battery left with 6-ish hours of screen on time. And another super practical feature that I've been using pretty much every day is the speech-to-text with Rambler. It's pretty much just as good as the demos make it seem, where you're able to speak naturally and Gemini will be able to edit out all of the pauses, the ums, the ahs, and even revise the sentence based on what you're saying. I just wish that it was able to generate the text. I just wish it was able to show the text that in real time instead of generating all of the text at the end when I'm done speaking. So you see, it was able to edit out all of the ums and the I means and just generate that final sentence in one go. But of course, it's not all positives because I have noticed some bugs as well. A lot of these issues are probably just due to this being a review unit with early software. But for example, I noticed it wouldn't find any Wi-Fi networks until I restarted the phone. And some apps would misbehave like the camera and messages. And I was only able to resolve them by clearing the cache and data from those apps. Again, these are all just super minor bugs that are not deal breakers by any means and can be easily fixed with a software update. So I'm going to keep testing out this device for a while and let me know in the comments if you have any questions and I'll definitely try to answer them. I'll also be working on a full long-term review of this phone, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that video when it comes out. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Peace.